I spent days trying to figure out how I wanted to start it and what I wanted to talk about. So, with that being said, ultimately, I decided on talking about the most powerful Sith in Star Wars history, including Star Wars Legends lore. For anyone out there listening, this might be lost on what Legend lore means. It covers every Star Wars book, novel, video game based on those stories. The ones I'm going to talk about are based off of feats of power that include Legends content and ones that showed up in the movies prior to the latest trilogy of Disney movies. So sorry, there's no Kylo Ren in this that's going to make this list. I also won't list all of them, but I've picked the 5 that I feel are the top 5 of the Sith Lords of all of Star Wars. Some of you may have heard of some of these names. Others you may actually learn. And all right, let's start with my number 5 Sith Lord, and that is Darth Nihilus. So, some hardcore Star Wars fans might be like, how the heck do you not have Darth Nihilus higher on the list, considering some think him to be the strongest Sith Lord in history for a couple of different reasons. For starters, his ability to force drain was probably the strongest in Star Wars history, to the point of being able to drain the force energy from entire planets. I know I said that I wouldn't bring up the newer Star Wars films, but just to give you a visual point of reference, in The Rise of Skywalker, or episode 9, when Sidious was draining the force from Kylo Ren and Rey, think of that. That's basically what force drain is. Well, picture that happening, but from an entire freaking planet. He also led what is known as the Dark Wars, which saw the Great Jedi Purge, causing the virtual extinction of the Jedi Order at the time. He was known as a wound in the Force due to his immense power in the Force, to the point to where at his height he could sense other Force beings throughout the galaxy, which is nuts just to actually think about. He could use all of the dark side abilities that we know, like Force Lightning, Force Scream, think Darth Sidious in episode 3, when he, at the beginning of the fight, when he was fighting Mace Windu and company, Force Rage, Force Healing, and the before mentioned Force Drain. Though he was insanely powerful, there aren't many other battle feats, which is why there are 4 others that feat-wise scale above him. My number 4 Sith Lord in all of Star Wars is a fan favorite of many when discussing Darth Vader. Now, some might think that after he got sliced up by Obi-Wan on Mustafar and becoming a cyborg, that he got much weaker than when he was alive Anakin Skywalker. While there are others who think that he was an absolute monster after this because he hit his peak. Darth Vader has some pretty insane feats that will make you question any preconceived bias you might have of him one way or the other. In his Legends lore, Vader was an absolute beast, having feats that saw him take on a whole fleet of rebel forces on his own when his ship was shot down by Luke Skywalker, to foiling the plans and defeating many that actually tried to assassinate him. His greatest feat in Legends lore was probably him defeating Starkiller, who happened to be his apprentice. Now, for anyone that didn't play the Force Unleashed video games and aren't familiar with how powerful Starkiller is, to give you an idea of how powerful Starkiller was, he was stated by Sidious himself to have the potential to be just as, if not more powerful than him, and even best Vader in a duel once. So Vader being able to beat him is no small feat. His force power, driven by his hatred for himself, which he stated on many occasions, by the way, gave off such a cold presence that many who weren't even force wielders could tell when he was nearby. Vader was an absolute terror and deserves this spot on the list. My number 3 Sith Lord, for this guy, I'm going to have to go deep into Star Wars Legends lore, because unless you are a super fan, the name Darth Krayt will probably not ring a bell, but let me tell you, this guy is insanely powerful, and there's a good argument to be made for him being number 1. When it came to feats, he lived from the Clone Wars, or episode 2 for a point of movie reference, all the way until he was killed by Luke Skywalker's son, Cade, about 2 centuries after the before mentioned Clone Wars. Speaking of Cade Skywalker, many common Star Wars fans know Luke to be the greatest, most powerful Jedi ever, but Cade was in Legends even stronger than Luke, and it took Cade almost to the point of death to actually defeat Darth Krayt. Outside of Krayt living for an insanely amount of time, he formed the new Sith Order, which is called the One Sith Order, which he formed to abolish the rule of 2 that was formed by Darth Bane, since he saw it as a flawed system. He also was trying to model his new empire after the Galactic Empire that Sidious formed, which he was kind of successful with doing, since it did reign for about 7 years. During his years, he dueled many notable Jedi like Obi-Wan, Luke Skywalker, and Cade Skywalker, to name a couple, and his force abilities were second to none. His telekinesis with the force was so strong that he could sense things happening across the galaxy, like for example, during the massacre of Ossus. Just think of this as another Order 66, just in the future. He had sensed how Cade Skywalker was healing his master during that massacre. Darth Krayt was powerful, but just not as powerful as the guy in the number 2 spot, which is Darth Sidious. Luckily, since he was the main villain for every single Star Wars movie, including episode 7 and 8, but we just didn't know it yet at the time, I don't think I have to spend a lot of time talking about the guy who is known as the pure embodiment of the Sith. Darth Sidious, also known as the Emperor, was at his strongest, perhaps the strongest force wielder ever, whether it be the dark side or the light side. During his reign, Sidious used his immense power to make sure no one opposed him, including his own apprentice and Darth Vader. He has every force ability at his disposal, and he was also excellent with a lightsaber, having known and mastered all 7 forms of lightsaber dueling. During his time, he had dueled and beat some of the most best duelists in the likes of Grandmaster Yoda, Darth Maul, and Savage Opress, and even took down one of my favorite Jedi in Kit Fisto fairly easy during the confrontation between Mace Windu when they came to arrest him after they found out he was a Sith Lord. Out of the 3 Jedi purges that led to Sith rule in the history of Star Wars, Sidious executed what many consider the greatest of those. Now, with all of this, it would easily have been hard-pressed to see anyone being a greater Sith than him, but there is one person that is, and is this guy. So I'm going to put it to you like this. In Star Wars Legends or canon, Grandmaster Luke Skywalker is considered the strongest Jedi of all time. And High Lord Saros not only fought him to a stalemate and even speed blitzed him at one point in their fight, he was able to even mind control him with his telekinesis. That's just all kind of stupid dumb to be able to do that to, again, who some consider the greatest Jedi of all time. He didn't have feats like Sidious or Krayt when it comes to building an empire or taking over the galaxy, but he was still a leader of his own cult group called the Lost Tribe of the Sith, which he was building so they could come back into power like the Sith were back in the Old Republic days. Like the aforementioned Sidious, he was able to use all of the Force abilities, and his Force lightning was said to be the strongest of any Sith user. The guy was so powerful that they had to have one of his disciples backstab him and kill him. Now, yes, I know that that's pretty much the story of the Sith when you look at Star Wars, apprentice killing master to take over, but this apprentice that killed him in Vestra Kai actually did this when they actually both were fighting Grandmaster Luke Skywalker, and they had him beat, and Luke Skywalker was said to be an enemy to them both and had caused them both pain, and she backstabbed him anyway. So it kind of made no sense for her to betray him, because afterwards it's not like she actually joined Luke Skywalker. She actually didn't. She just killed a guy. They really didn't even have a good reason as to why she did it either in Legends. So yeah, the writers just wrote themselves into a corner because they wrote him so powerful and just decided to kill the guy. That's basically what happened. If Star Wars mythos expands, we might have to revisit this list, but until then, High Lord Saros takes the top spot.